heck are these for?
Something about a hard link.
You're supposed to secure a perimeter before the lecture?
No touching the professor during the lecture.
Yeah, exactly. Do not approach the podium. I have another question. Has anyone ever heard of lime cucumber Gatorade? So I went climbing over the weekend and I just happened to grab this off the shelf and I couldn't drink it. I mean, I tried, but lime, just imagine lime cucumber.
Yeah. Some hotels do that too. They'll have like cucumber and fruit water.
That's true. I've had that. That's not quite as bad as this was. It was like, I don't know, some kind of abomination. All right, so I just handed back quiz 2. I don't know if there's anything interesting to talk about. Let's see. Number 1 was a recent conference paper suggested obscuring IPv4 by hashing MD5. Problem is? What's the problem with that?
You can obviously just like compare pre-computed hashes of IPv4 addresses.
Okay, so you could pre-compute them. How many IPv4 addresses are there?
Known quantity.
Well, yeah, but
I mean, 3 billion or something. Like it's countable. It's limited. It's
infinity's countable though. I mean, like the number of integers, right?
yeah.
If it was 2 to the 128, then we'd have a problem. So if I put IPv6 here, then there's no clear answer what the problem is, right? But since it's IPv4, there's 2 to the 32, which is about 4 billion, right?
Yeah, 4.3 billion.
So 2 to the 10 is 1,000 or 1K. 2 to the 20 is about 1 million or 1 meg. 2 to the 30 is about 1 gig, and 2 to the 32 is 2 to the 30 times 2 to the 2. 2 to the 2 is 4 billion. 4 billion hashes take how long? I don't know, a couple minutes. So you could just compute all of the hashes of all of the IPv4 address space, and then just reverse any hash that way, because there's only 4 billion of them. So that was the answer. Number 2, probably the hardest one, maybe, depending on if you saw it or not. A recent version of Pulse Audio was set UID root and re-execute itself by doing the following. I won't go into why the program decided it needed to restart itself, but if a program wants to restart itself, this is maybe one way to do it, although you shouldn't do this for set UID for reasons we're about to talk about. So proc self exe is a symlink. I said recall that, but you probably didn't know it. I didn't know it until I read this. So let's see. So in proc self, there's always this symlink called exe. And is it on the disk? Like if I pulled my hard disk out and looked at this path, would I find this file?
No.
No, it's not on the disk. It's simulated by the kernel. Everything in /proc doesn't really live on the media. It's simulated by the kernel. When you do an open or a read or a write to these things, you're actually talking to the kernel, and it's going to update some data structure or read some data structure out if you have permissions. So when I look at this exe file, it's a symlink. You can tell by the L here, right? And it points to /bin/bash y.
That's
That's what it's programmed to do?
yeah, points to the executable that started the parent process. Or the parent thread.
It's evaluating this, and the thing that's evaluating it is my shell, which is what it's running right now. So it's a symlink to the program that's running when this is consulted. And then once I have it, it's doing the LL. So it's a way of you ever heard of reflection? There's a bunch of programming languages that can do reflection, look at themselves. It's a way of looking at yourself. But the main takeaway is that when you examine this, it's going to be whatever program did the open call on exe. And in this case, it's bin bash. In this case, it's going to be whatever the executable was that was pulse audio. So it opens that, does a read link, so it's going to follow it and get the actual binary that was run in order to run it, and then it execs that binary again with different parameters or whatever. What's the problem? What's the high level problem, do you think?
Change the link.
What's the name of the vulnerability? Why would you want to change the link? What do we call it?
Security.
A talk to or a race condition, right? There's a race condition. That's the name of the class of vulnerabilities. Okay, so there's a gap between following this link and then executing the binary that it points to. And probably most people thought there's some kind of race condition issue here, but technically exploiting it is a little bit tricky because you can't just change the symlink. Because you can't change that symlink. That's not even a real link, it's not on the disk, it's in the kernel, you don't have the ability to change it. So what you do to exploit this is you use a hard link. So if you've got pulse audio, I don't know, living in /bin or something. And it's set UID root, right? Now, of course, you don't own that, but you could hard link to it, couldn't you? So in my home directory, I could say link, let's see, X, I don't know. I'm just gonna make something else. So what does that do? That's a hard link, right? I didn't say -s. And so what does it do? What is X now? It's directory entry in my home directory. And it points to what inode. The same one as this. So therefore it has the same set UID root, same execute bits turned on, same size, same super blocks out on the disk, everything's the same, except I can just run it from my home directory. Is this a problem? You type this now instead of typing that. Okay, so now when the program runs, what's going to happen is it's going to do, it's going to do this read link proc self exe, and what is that exe going to resolve to? This. But you can switch this, it's in your home directory. Right, so after it reads this to get the actual binary, and then it goes to execute this, now you overwrite this with something else, which you couldn't do here. Right. If you did that, it wouldn't work, right? Because if you do that, all you're doing is creating a symbolic link to this binary, and then read link is going to go all the way to here, and it'll be looking at this one, and then it'll go and execute that one, and then you can't change it because you don't own this file, so the race condition can't be exploited that way. But with hard link, you can. That was hard. Number 3, how would you exploit a set UID root program that does the following? The issue here is this thing is getting its real user ID and setting the real end effective to whatever the real is, and then execlp we know is vulnerable because it uses the path variable. And it doesn't have an absolute path to ls, it just says ls plainly. So we know how to exploit this. We just manipulate the path variable to point to our own version of ls. But unfortunately, it's a set UID root program that dropped privileges except what? The saved UID is still there. So in your exploit, in your fake ls, the first thing it's going to do is take the saved, which is going to be a 0, put it back into the real and the effective, and then go on to spawn a shell or do whatever bad stuff you want to do. So those are two things you had to know, that exec LP is bad and that you can still get to the saved value. Number 4, it's off by 8. Your partner says it's not a problem, but it still is. Why? What's the answer?
The overflows.
The high 16 bits is going to also overflow. It's going to not be FFFF. It's going to be something that's going to be that plus 8. So it overflows to the high side. That was maybe easier. Number 5. I don't want to do it, but it's basically that you have you have a way around the canary by using this pointer, and you can overflow it to argv1 such that when it follows the pointer, you can go around the canary. And number 6, there was a program here that's compiled on a big Indian machine rather than little Indian, and no canaries. And it's got an off by 1 error, right? It copies 1 byte too far. And the idea there was, because it's big Indian, is that you can only overwrite the first byte, but you can overwrite it with any value you want, so you can make it a negative value, because this is an int. If you put I below the buffer that's overflowing by 1, and I is the counter, you can make I go negative by manipulating its most significant byte to have its most significant bit a 1. And that'll make it negative because I is not an unsigned, it's a signed integer. So if you make it negative, it'll keep going.
On 5?
Yeah.
I mean, just like through the, did you talk about like what are you supposed to overwrite into the A pointer?
You want to write a new return address. You want to overwrite the return address with a value. Let's see. So argv1 is going to be a return address of your choice. And normally we overflow a buffer and then we clobber the canary and then overwrite the return address, and that gets detected.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, we're going to overflow into this pointer value called A. It's an integer pointer.
Mm-hmm.
Direct it to the return address around
How
the
do you
canary.
know the return address?
I mean, we know the return address the way that we always do, which is like, we're gonna set, wait, do you wanna know what to set the return address to or what the return address is?
What do you set this A pointer to? Like when you're overflowing into that pointer, what do you set it to? And how do you know that?
You set it to the address of the return address on the stack, which you're gonna know because you know what's on the stack, you know how large the buffer is, you know that there's a canary that takes this many bytes, so you know where it is relative to the buffer.
Okay. So this is, okay.
I probably should have said also ASLR is off, but I said it's on Razor. It's compiled on Razor, so ASLR on would make this impossibly hard probably, because you have to know where on the stack the return address is, because you need to overflow and make that pointer point to the return address, and then set that return address to your no-op sled in the environment or something like that. If the stack's moving around, those two things will move around, both the return address you're trying to overwrite and the shellcode that's on the stack is going to move as well, and that would be awful. But it's on Razor, so there's no ASLR. The only difference is that it's got a canary here, and you use this trick to get around the canary. Anything else? Yeah.
The first question, I came up with a possible solution that there's going to be a lot of collisions because when we use private IPs, when pretty obscure using MD5, they're going to collide a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the paper in question wasn't hashing private IP addresses. It was trying to obscure public IP addresses. I didn't say that though. But I guess if you were putting private IP addresses into the pool too, they would collide. Well, it depends on how many you put in. Yeah, they might collide a lot. But then just the existence collisions, does that reveal anything?
Well, it just makes it like impossible to use, doesn't it? Maybe
You
try
can't-
it.
Yeah, it would be hard to use as a,
You can't use the side error
right.
because when you try to, when your device
I
reconnects to
see.
the network, there'll be different.
So I should have said, instead of explain why this is a poor idea, explain why it's straightforward to reveal the IPv4 address related to any MD5 output. All right, well, if you're arguing that you still found why it's a poor idea, talk to me after class and I'll give you a free lime cucumber data. All right, that's it for the quiz. Unless there's anything else.
What was the average?
I don't know. He just sent it to me like right before class. I'm worried if I pull it up, it's gonna display everybody's scores on the screen. The average was 100%. What'd you get?
I can tell you that's impossible.
Oh, that reveals information, man. Careful.
Well, I could have gotten a 99.
Still round up to 100.
I guess, yeah.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me. It's not on the screen, is it?
No.
You guys all start laughing. The grader program now no longer works because they upgraded this machine. This has caused so many problems, and they did it in the middle of the semester without warning.
You think they at least would have waited between semesters to do something like that?
You'd think.
Silly ops person.
I'll try it for a couple more seconds to see if I can get it working. LD Linux SO, no such file directory. So some of the libraries are missing now.
Sorry, when using all the,
This is why we can't have nice things.
Apparently.
So when you storing the IP addresses, it's more likely that you come across private IPs as well.
Well, I have all the scores, but I can't compute an average because my program doesn't work. All right, I'm gonna do it in my head. It looks like about high 30s is average, just from eyeballing it. Or more like maybe a median is high 30s instead of an average. Okay, sorry. Anything else? All right, so we have one topic to cover today, and that is SQL injections. Also, the final, I'm still working on the final machine, but it's on Saturday in this room at 1:30. Is that right?
I think so.
I've got 1:30 to 4 on my calendar. Have people independently verified that?
Yeah.
That sounds
Okay.
perfect.
I'll verify it again. If I'm wrong, I'll post it to Slack, but I'm pretty sure Saturday, the 14th, 1:30 to 4. Bring any books, notes, papers you want. It's all open book. Everybody should have some kind of laptop that can have SSH on it. You can have Kali. You can bring any tools that you downloaded, that you've written yourself. You can bring any tools that you downloaded, that you've written yourself. You can bring any tools that you downloaded, that you've written yourself. You can bring any tools that you downloaded, that you've written yourself. You can bring any tools that you downloaded, that you've written yourself. I plan to have both Razor and Blade up in case you somehow need to consult those or want another machine. Your target machine for the final will be on the same network as the networks we've been using. You're going to use the same trick that you've been using on Blade to forward a port out so that you can point a browser or a tool at port 80 of the victim. Each team will have a separate machine. There won't be one shared machine this time. I will name the machine after the name of your team. I need team names. I should give you a deadline. Who's got a team figured out for the final? Okay. I guess by Thursday, 2 days from now, let's have teams settled. If you have a team, one team person, designate a team captain. That captain should Slack me with a direct message what her name or his name is, and then the name of her team and the name of the members. And I'll write something to General today to remind you to do this. And there are 16 people in the class, and so anybody I find who's not on a team, I will prompt you to find a team, and if you don't, I will just put you on a team. It is possible to do the final solo if you want to. Some people have done this in the past. I don't think it's a good idea. It's a lot of work, and more eyes helps. And there's pretty much no detriment to having one more person on the team. Teams should be 2 to 4. Once again, I'll let you do a solo if you really want to, but I recommend 2 to 4 people. It often involves, and will again involve, just poking around. Like once you get on this box, there's a bunch of files lying around, and there's like maybe hints or things that you might not see but your teammate might stumble upon. Divide up the work, have a pair of eyes on everything, and try to find like breadcrumbs to go pursue so that you can continue to escalate through the levels. And it's not levels, but it's like there's a regular user, then there's an administrative user, then there's a super admin, and then there's root. So you're going to logically progress through access to these various accounts. There's some other accounts that maybe you don't care about, but you want to find accounts with higher and higher levels of privilege. And this will be obvious from things like emails and things like that. Just having people look through the files, hey, could you go look in this directory through these files? I'm going to check out these files. I'm going to look at their email, whatever, that kind of thing. So doing that by yourself is kind of hard. But if you really want to, you can have a solo team. I'll stay later if we need to. Sometimes there's another final right on the heels of ours, so we can't just hang out. But usually people finish. One year I made it too hard and then everybody was still here, which is a problem. But I'll try not to do that this year. Any questions about the final?
As far as like how grading's going to work for that, is it just sort of like if you make it to the end, that's an A?
Well, for sure if you get to the end. So
Or
the
just
final.
how many hints you need along the way?
Sorry?
Or is it just like how many hints you need along the way? Sort of.
Yeah, I'm pretty liberal with the final. Like, I want this to be a positive final experience, pun intended, for you guys. And I will, like I said before, if you're on a team and you're getting stuck and it's like you're an hour and a half in and you're still not even on the machine yet, I will come over and go like look at that. Doesn't that mean something to you? I've never had it happen where all 4 people look at me and go like, I've never heard of SQL injections before, right? So everyone tends to get through. Sometimes people don't finish, but they get close to finishing. The final deliverable to me is a write-up of everything you did. So you'll want to have somebody documenting as you go, everything you're doing, so that you don't have to spend another hour at the end writing it all down from memory. And you email me your team name, your team members, and the write-up, and then you're done, you can leave. I grade that. I will have some memory of interacting with you during the final exam if there was any interaction, which there usually will be with each team. I'll usually float around and see where everybody is, and if, like I said, if you're really far behind, I'm gonna nudge you to hurry up. And I'll make notes about that, but I'm not gonna give you a C+ because I had to tell you look over there or something like that. That just won't happen. Most people get an A on the final. Most people get through it. Very rarely does some team founder. Anything else?
So you can get your own shell code for the test.
Sorry?
So the shell code which you've written, at home, you can get that for the test.
You can bring it with you. Just have it on your machine. I tend not to do tricky shellcode stuff because then you have to go to Metasploit and generate special shellcode or hand write shellcode that's hand tailored to some funky way, and that tends to take hours sometimes. I did it once. That was the one where nobody finished. So I might not do that this year.
I also found the Metasploit shellcode generator to be really, really flaky.
Yeah, it can be temperamental.
I was using that for one of the Razor ones, and it never really
It never worked.
No.
I mean, other people have had no problem, so it depends on the day and which shellcode you're getting.
Yeah.
Anything else? Finals should be fun. Don't stress about it. Stress about all your other finals, not this one. All right, here we go. Last topic. I've got a guest coming Thursday, so this is the last topic that matters as far as final exam and the material of the class. So SQL is code injection. It's injecting this language called SQL, but almost everything in this class has been some kind of code injection. Semicolon attack is a way of injecting bash or whatever. Shellcode is injected into a victim as machine language. This is injecting SQL. Who's ever seen or written SQL before? I think that's everybody. Okay. All right. So SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It was, I don't know, written by IBM in like the 70s or something. I think did I tell you the story about Quell? Did I mention this? So when I was an undergrad, 88, I had two offers. I like databases, and I had two offers. One from this company called Ingress. Maybe you've heard of Postgres, which is a follow-on to Ingress. And they had a language called Quell, which stands for query language. And there was this other company called like Oracle or something, and they used SQL. And I decided to go to Ingress, and Ingress is now defunct. And if I'd gone to Oracle instead, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd probably be sitting like in Trump Tower. That's gross, but I'd probably be somewhere, else and rich instead of shopping at Target. So SQL now predominates. It's the #1 query language for at least for relational databases. There's this big push for no SQL databases and no data stores because parsing SQL and optimizing SQL queries is time consuming. There are a whole bunch of different SQL engines. Postgres I just mentioned, Oracle I just mentioned. There's MySQL. MySQL was an open source, free SQL product, came out of the open source community. It was now purchased, or I don't know if it's purchased, but it was taken over by, I think, Microsoft?
Sun.
Really?
It was Sun that got it, and then of course
So
that
now
got
it's
wrapped
Oracle?
into, yes, which is why it's been forked, and it's now
Okay.
Mariah.
Okay, but it's still around as MySQL and still free. The way it works, there's a bunch of other SQL engines too. I mean, what's the Microsoft one?
Just MS SQL.
MS SQL, and they also have like Access, which is not SQL, is it? That's their other database.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a bunch of SQL engines out there. Sybase has one. Informix. Anyway, so the way that MySQL works is it has a daemon, so it has like a server. It runs on port 3306, I think. On TCP, so it's running here. It's bound to localhost. What does that mean?
The port is only exposed to localhost.
That's right. So incoming TCP connections can only come from Razor itself. I'm on Razor. If an attempt is made to connect TCP/IP to port 3306 from off the box, it won't work. The reason for this is because this server accepts login requests, username and password, but it's not resilient to brute forcing. It doesn't have like 5 tries and there's a 10-minute lockout period and you have to reset your password, all that. So it's not very robust in that sense, and therefore it's meant just to be attached to from clients that are already on the same machine. The client is called MySQL. That's the prompt. You can use it from the command line like I'm about to do. You can use it from PHP, which is what you would do if you're writing a website application and you want to look at stuff. What's DVWA? The damn vulnerable web application, the thing we've used, I think, twice now. If I want to see the rows of the table called users, what do I type?
Select star.
And this doesn't quite fit on the screen, but user ID is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, first name, last name, username. What are these? There's passwords. They look like they're about MD5 sized, like 32 X characters. Avatar, last login, failed login. So pretty standard looking user database table that is going to be used from PHP when someone fills in a form and says, my name is, I don't know, hack/me, and types in their password. The PHP code will then hash it and then do a select and look up the hash password for this username and make sure they match. And if they do a start session, which will create a cookie, which will establish a session with the user. And if not, we'll say try again or whatever, right? This is kind of the usual dance. All right. I'm gonna stay connected there just in case there's something interesting we want to do, but it sounds like everybody's used SQL before. All right, so the idea of injections. So if we issue this query, select author, title, so this is not select star, what is this naming?
You're giving the column names.
I'm giving column names, right? So you can select certain columns within the universe of all the columns, and it'll output a table that has just those 2 columns. From, and what's books? That's the name of the table. And then where is a row filter, right? So this is a column filter, I only want these 2 columns. And then where is, I only want these rows, where the publisher equals Wiley. So this will select out the rows where publisher is Wiley and just give me the author and title. Familiar? Simple. All right, but what if I do the same query and I say where publisher is O'Reilly, and notice the quote marks? What's gonna happen here?
Syntax error.
I mean, it's syntax error, right? Because the second single quote closes the open quote on the O, and then I've got Riley, which is not valid SQL syntax. So we've got some issues with quotes. If you close the quote, then the rest of it's going to be interpreted as additional SQL and not part of the value. All right, so what if we got control of this parameter, the publisher equals blah? Blah is something that's a variable that we can control. So if that's a variable that you can set, everything after the equal sign and before the semicolon is something you can set, what could you do? Well, you can insert Wiley close quote and then put or open quote 1 close quote equal open quote 1, and the resulting string, if you put this big thing right here as the value of publisher, then what's going to happen is the thing we inserted is in blue. The original black font is what's already there in the program syntax itself. We've injected this blue thing. Is this syntax valid?
Yes.
Yeah, because the blue thing I injected closes the quote and then puts an or, open quote 1 close quote equals open quote 1, and then I stop and let the program source code close the quote and put the semicolon, and this all forms valid syntax. And when is this clause satisfied?
Always.
Always. Because who cares about Wiley, right? I'm saying either that happens or 1 equals 1, which is always true. So I've changed this to be selected rows to now all the rows. All right. So we're going to succeed and see all the rows of the table. In PHP version 3, which is a long time ago now, we're in version 7 these days, it disallows semicolons, so you can't just put close quote, semicolon attack, separate query. Or insert into table, your own user and password, and now you're a user on the machine. You can't issue arbitrary SQL commands because there's no semicolon attack. All right, so let's go try this. In DBWA, this is the source code for the low. Remember, there are different security levels: low, medium, high, impossible. This is for low. So set a PHP variable called ID that's going to be a get parameter, and then select first name, last name from users, where user ID is equal to whatever that was gotten from the browser, which means you can control it to be whatever you want. So if we inject into ID close quote, which will close this first quote here, or 1 equals open quote 1 and then don't close it, let the second close single quote close it for you, this should be valid syntax, and we should see all the rows. Okay. It then does MySQL underscore query, which issues this string as an SQL query, gets the result, and then shows the result back on the screen. Let's go try it. By the way, normally you don't get to see the source code, right? So we're kind of cheating. So I've got it set to security levels low, and here's the source code just to verify. Here are all the levels. So maybe I had an older version of DBWA when I wrote that slide. Now it's coming out of this request superglobal instead. Works the same way. Get the ID, and there's the query, and then it issues the query and prints out everything that comes back. So let's try it. Flip this up. So if I print user ID is 1, that's the admin, and user ID is 2, that's Gordon Brown. But what I suggested was we say user ID is 1 or quote 1 equals, and now we see all of the rows. Okay, so that was not intended, well, it was because this is intended to be vulnerable, but you could imagine this wasn't intended to be the behavior, and now I'm able to see all the rows. Okay, so that's an injection in some way. It didn't inject a new command, but it perturbed the intended behavior of the select. All right, what else could we do? Any questions? See what's going on? Here's something else we could do. We could close the quote and then say or equals 1 dash dash. The dash dash is a comment symbol in some SQLs, and in MySQL it is. And it means ignore the rest of the line. It's kind of like putting a slash slash in C++. Ignore the rest of the line. Why do I need that? Why can't I just say 1 equals 1, which is always true, and then call it a day?
Because it would allow you to possibly filter out a more complex query to make it simpler.
No, because there's a tick.
There's still one tick remaining is the problem, right? After this user supplied value, which is is tick or 1 equal 1.
So now you're comparing numbers instead of.
I'm comparing numbers instead of two strings. When I did strings, I had quote 1 quote equals quote 1, and then I didn't close it because there's a tick remaining in the source code. But now I'm saying 1 equals 1 as two integers compared, and then I have to comment the rest of the line out so that when it comes, the final tick and the semicolon are there, those are left off. Otherwise, I'll get a syntax error. And let's see if that works. And you need a trailing space at the end. I don't know why. I probably could go figure it out, and I never even bothered to. Well, that didn't work.
You still need one quote after the first, or one tick after the first.
All right. Okay, that worked. So there are all the values again. So it's the same thing as before, except I don't have to do all this dancing around with tick 1, tick equals tick 1, all that stuff. This is a lot of times more flexible, this double dash thing. Let's discover how many columns the result has. So I'm pretending I don't know what the SQL query is. We actually just looked at it because I looked at the source code. Normally you can't see the PHP source code, so you don't know what the query is. Order by is sorting by what column of the result. So if I say order by 1, that means the first column of the result. Order by 2, the second column in the query, 3, and so forth. So if I do this, that was okay. In other words, I didn't get an error. How many columns were in the query? So on 3, unknown column. So there must have been 2 columns in my query, and we know that there were because we looked at the source code already, and it's right here. It's first name, comma, last name. So I knew that there were 2 columns being selected in the query, but if I didn't know that, I could probe it by saying order by 1, that didn't give me an error. Order by 2, order by 3 gave me an error. Notice also that this is terrible, right? This is an application that is exposing SQL errors back to the browser. You shouldn't do that. It's a lot of information. So DVWA has this option to do SQL injection tests, which is where we are right now. But there's also SQL injection blind. Blind means those errors don't come back, which makes it harder. Because if you have errors coming back, it's quite helpful. Okay, what are the column names? I have the source code, so I know what they are, but if I pretend I don't, I can add queries based on guesses of the column name. So if I say tick or first name equals admin, that doesn't work, it gives me an error, right? Let's try it. You have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual. For the right syntax to use near first name equals admin at line 1. So helpful, it's saying that that's the wrong column name. If I then add an underscore, which we know is right. What? I thought that was right. Did I not get the quotes right?
It looks like there's 2 ticks at the end.
Did I forget the or? Yeah, I forgot to say or. Okay. So you can guess at column names when you don't get an error, when you get something back. So we know first name and last name are the column names. The database version. So close quote, and then I'm going to say union. What does union do?
Joins two different tables.
Yeah, be careful with the word join, of course, with SQL.
Oh, well, yeah.
But it somehow merges. I'm trying to not say the word union, it unions them. So in set theory, right, when you had two sets and you've got union and intersection, the intersection was this upside down cup symbol, the union is the right side up cup symbol. It takes two things and merges them into one set. Now in SQL, you've got two tables, you can union them together, but they have to have the same number of columns so that the columns can line up, and those columns have to be similar data types such that one can be converted to the other. They can't be completely dissimilar. So I'm going to say to union the first select with another select, which is, in this case, so I wrote this query, close tick, and then that select will be union with union all allows duplicate rows in case there are duplicates. Select one, which is a constant. So you can say select anything you want. In SQL, I can say select one and it'll just give me a table with a one in it. I don't have to select from a table. I can just select a value and it'll create a table. I can say select 4 times the arctangent of 1. That's pi, right? Yeah, arctan of 1 is pi over 4. So whatever. So I can say select this special MySQL constant. This is not standard SQL, so other SQLs may not have at version as a constant that you can query. But this one does, and it gives you the version of MySQL that's currently running. That might be useful because, of course, if we know the version, we can look up known exploits, known vulnerabilities, and so forth. So here's my table. The surname is 5.7.28. It's the Ubuntu, whatever, version number of MySQL. That might be useful. So a union is a way of issuing another select statement, but with constraints. Your other select, which is going to be unioned into your main result, has to conform to the proper number of columns and the proper data types. It's not that bad. I mean, I was able to get an integer to be a string, 1 is first name, and then this string is a string. That wasn't a hard conversion. What is the MySQL user and database name that's running under DBWA? It looks like it's running as root on a database called DBWA. That's the database I'm currently using, so I kind of knew that. But it's interesting to know and good to know that DBWA is connecting to MySQL as the root user. It means if we were to break into it, that'd be rather powerful. Oh, what's the root password hash? So I'm not gonna be able to get the password itself because the passwords aren't stored in the database, but getting the password hash is often useful, right? If it's MD5, especially if it's unsalted, knowing that the password hash is really nice. Yeah. MySQL.user. So select user, comma password from MySQL.user. What did I do wrong? Wish this were a bigger box. I'll select user, comma.
function?
No. It's usually the MySQL database user table.
Did you maybe forget the start and the end? Or start
I think
and
it's
end?
there.
Okay.
And I don't think. No, that's not gonna work either. What was the other error that it gave me?
The other error was on password, it wasn't on the MySQL
Oh, right.
table existing.
Did I misspell it? Password doesn't list. Maybe MySQL has changed recently and they no longer call that password, or I misspelled password. I guess I can go look.
Password used.
So it's saying that there's no column called password here.
So schema preferences.
I see password expired. So whatever the name of this field is.
Authentication screen.
Does anybody see something that maps to that? Authentication string, is that what you're thinking?
I think so,
Then it's
yeah.
followed by password required, and then we have an end right after.
Okay. Obviously, that's not a big secret. That's going to be documented as part of MySQL. So there it is, right? That's not MD5 though. Okay, so the last time I did this, it was MD5, and you could just use md5this.com, which is a website that has pre-computed tables. Often you can just Google MD5 hashes and you'll find it that way. That is attacking the root login in MySQL, not the application itself. We're running out of time, so I'm going to speed up here. Let's see. Password hashes. Select user password from DWA tables. So now I'm going to read this specifically. From the application itself. So this is not, so I was reading the MySQL database, which is the database that contains all users that have logins to this database. Root was the one I was interested in. That was not specific to this application DBWA, that was for all users of that database, period. This is a separate database called the DBWA database. It has a table called users. It doesn't have to, it's just that this application decided to have a table called users, which is a pretty common table name. I issued via union all select I issued a query of user, comma, password. I only get to say 2 columns because I've got a union with the existing first name, last name select that's already in the PHP. But I asked to see these 2 columns from the users table, and out come the username and the MD5 hash. Okay, so we know how to reverse MD5 hashes, at least there are a couple of ways we can do it. If I take this and just Google it, I can go to MD5 this or something, but I can just Google it, and a lot of times it'll just give it to you. You see it? It looks like it's the hash of the word password. So the password is password for that account. And a lot of these will just show up because they're dumb passwords, because this is damn vulnerable, right? If I make you crack an MD5 hash on the final, it'll be something easy to crack. It won't be something takes you hours in a bathtub of mineral oil and a bunch of GPUs. Do you see what I've done here though? I've just issued my own SQL query, my own select against the dba.users database. The medium level. So the medium level, are there any questions? The medium level starts escaping certain strings so that you can't add ticks. It uses MySQL real escape strings, so it puts backslashes in front of a lot of these special characters. So you can't add a tick as part of your, or if you do add a tick, it'll be backslash, so it'll get taken as a literal tick and not something you can use as part of the syntax of the select. But here's medium right here. So it's doing this MySQLi real escape string, but the one difference is there are no single quotes around $ID anymore. So you don't have to use a tick because you don't have to close IT. I figured that one out pretty quickly. I haven't been able to break high. High is supposed to be still exploitable, and impossible is supposed to not be exploitable. Since the quotes are missing with this one, you can just do the same thing without the closed tick. Just put one union all select, and you can do all the same stuff. For impossible level, they use parameterized SQL queries. Have you ever heard of that? This is the right way for all of you people who are ever going to write SQL in a web application. This is the right way to do it. So what you do is you first do a prepare statement, and you set up your select, and you leave the parameter out. So this is where the user supplied parameter is going to be, but you prepare the select first. The parser on the SQL engine parses this and is saying, okay, all I'm waiting for now is the parameter. Whatever comes over now is no longer part of the syntax of the select. It's just the string that's going to be shoved into this one spot.
And this is just PHP.
Yeah, but
We just slide
MySQL has to support this, but it does. But what you do is you first do a prepare. You do not have any user tainted value in this select. This is a hard-coded string that is passed to the SQL engine. It parses it and gets ready and says, all I need is this one missing piece. It's going to be supplied as a user parameter. Then you bind the parameter, and then you do the execute and then fetch the answer. So the user doesn't have any way of inserting special characters that affect the parsing of the select, because the select's already been parsed before the user input ever gets involved. In other words, it's parameterized. It's set up first with parameters, and then the parameters are bound later into the query. And no one's, to my knowledge, ever injected an had SQL injection attacks if you do it this way. Still, the vast majority of stuff is not done this way. So tons of stuff is still vulnerable out there. XKCD was informed about this and it was ignored. I'll tell you the story in a second. Have you seen this strip before? It's become fairly popular. This woman is getting a call. This is your son's school. We're having trouble. Did he break something? And she's like, well, did you really name your son Robert, quote, close parent, semicolon, drop table students, semicolon, dash, dash, right? So apparently this database allows the semicolon attack because this young man named himself or said his name was something with a semicolon and then dropped the tables, dropped the student's table. So he's destroyed the student's table. And she says, oh yes, little Bobby Tables, we call him. So that actually is his name. Well, we've lost the student records. I hope you're happy, and I hope you learn to sanitize your database input. So the recommended solution here is to sanitize. That is not the right solution. Sanitizers are notoriously hard to get wrong. And there was a security guy, I was watching a talk, and he said, you know, I called the guy who writes XKCD, or I emailed him. And I said, do not tell people to sanitize, that's the wrong way. They should use parameterized inputs. And apparently the author wrote back with a one-word email and just said, nerd. And left this up.
I feel like that's how you get hacked. Send a security
Yeah, right.
researcher like a sassy response.
Bobby Tables is a website. Unfortunately, it's not a very good website. But it talks about SQL injections and it doesn't talk about parameterizing, I don't think. Yeah, the word parameterize, bless you, is not even on this site. So, anyway. This is super famous strip at this point. You have to know it if you've had this class. All right. Bugs are categorized normal and blind. Blind is harder. Blind means you don't get the errors back. If you look at blind and DVWA, the or die was removed, and the number of the @ sign in front of MySQL number of rows suppresses errors. To find these things, entry points that are interesting are obviously form fields, get and post parameters that are not exposed that you can inject via burp or on the URL in the case of get, in cookies, in headers. Try fuzzing. What's fuzzing?
Randomizing text.
Putting a bunch of garbage into fields just to see what comes back. Usually it's kind of not completely random, but a lot of garbage, extremely long inputs where short inputs are expected. Things like this where you leave quotes half open. Percent mark is like an asterisk. It's a wildcard, so in SQL percent means matches anything. So if I say J percent, that means John and Jake and Jay, Jordan will all match.
Wait, so it's saying that percent is interpreted the same way as an asterisk?
Yeah, in a like clause. So if you say it's like J star, then it means anything that starts with a J. It's like an asterisk. Like in Bash, I would say ls J star, and we go all files starting with J. It's percent in SQL. I know that's weird.
But they also use the asterisk, like select. Can you do like select star?
Select star means all columns. But when we're doing
But it
pattern
doesn't-
matching of strings against some pattern, in that case, don't ask me why, it's percent. And it's called, and use the word like, not equals. There's other statements other than select. So there's insert, where you can insert new values into a table. There's update, where you can change existing values if you're able to inject arbitrary SQL. All right, what time is it? Oh,
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. There most likely will be some SQL injection on the final that may not be the only way in. Sometimes I'll have different ways in, or I'll accidentally have different ways in. One last question. What's robots.txt?
Search engines, what to do with your site, basically.
Okay. robots.txt is a text file that is optionally available at the root document location of a server. And it has a list of all of the paths within that website that these spiders, web crawlers, should not index. Right? You're saying, I welcome you, Google, to index my beautiful website, but please don't index these pages over here because they're private or they're not part of what I want to index. I don't want these to be searchable. You, as a pen tester / final taker, are interested in robots.txt because
That's one. Maybe the development pages.
yeah, maybe there's some development pages or some other pages I don't want indexed, but you're interested in taking a look at those because maybe there's something intended only for developers or administrators that you might be able to make progress by looking at. I don't know why I just decided to say that. All right, we're done. Yeah, so I will be here Thursday, but I will see you Saturday at 1:30, and someone else will be here Thursday.